Creativity is intelligence having fun. When you think of a creative, you typically think like artist, musician, or fashion designer. But the most prolific creators in history were actually knowledge workers and scientists. I do believe that there is a component of talent and luck when it comes to creativity, but it's actually a lot smaller than people think. Creativity is science. It should be questioned, studied, and tested to improve, and it definitely can't be forced. So in this video, I want to show you the simple mental model I use to engineer creativity. It's the same system I use when I work with 7- and 8-figure brands, and it's what we've personally used to grow on YouTube to over 1.3 million subscribers and generate over 100 million views. And the best part is it works for any brand or business. Creativity is a template plus constraints. And I wrote template here in a different color, and I put brackets around it because this is what you're going to swap out for whatever task you're working on or whatever the original idea that you're working with is. When people thought Star Wars was original, no. The template that came before it was, I think, Star Trek or Dune or something, and they just added different constraints. They added different characters, they added a different kind of magic system to it. Or when you think about tech companies, for example, when Twitter came to the scene back in the day, there was already social media platforms where you can post content. But Twitter added a constraint back in the early days that you could only write something that was 280 characters long. And that constraint forced people to play by different rules. They had to figure out how to share tweets that were shorter, more impactful, more punchy and witty, and that game actually made it go viral. And I want to bring this point here that template can also be inspiration. For example, let's say that you're watching a movie that really inspired you, like Dune Part 2 or Dune 1, and how epic that soundtrack is, or maybe even the color grading, right? That can be your inspo, and you can plug that in as your template. Now, in order to use that and come up with a creative idea, I would add a constraint to it. The constraint would be, in this case, since I'm not a Hollywood producer, I don't have the budget of a Hollywood producer, and I'm making this for YouTube, those are all different constraints for how I would use that idea. So I can use the color grading in a YouTube video, that's a constraint, and then I would have a creative idea, right? People would see the color grading of your channel and be like, oh, this looks amazing. But the fact that it's a different video, the fact that it's on YouTube, the fact that it's my face and not Timothée Chalamet, although that'd be awesome if I can get him in here. And obviously, because you're probably not going to do it exactly the same way as the original creator did, is going to naturally create something different. And that's where creativity stems from. It's copying, it's remixing, and it's getting inspo from and then adding your own creative constraints to it that creates something novel and something new. So the next question becomes, how do you choose which constraints you want to work in? So I've broken down constraints into two categories. We have convergent constraints and divergent constraints. So let's talk about convergent constraints first. So first, let's say that those are my ideas. When you think of anything converging on something, what's actually happening? Converging means that they are coming together like this, right? And we're limiting and restricting the amount of things we have to work with. You can think of convergent constraints as working with the tools that you have. So let me just rip through a few examples for you guys, and I'll keep it relevant to creative teams and brands for YouTube. So let's say that our template for this is how to make a viral YouTube video, right? It's kind of generic. So let's add some convergent constraints to see if we can make it more interesting. A really common convergent constraint that you see all the time on YouTube is time, right? So how to make a YouTube video in 24 hours, right? Or you can even add more time constraint to it. How to make a YouTube video in 12 hours. You can also add a convergent financial constraint. How to make a viral YouTube video with $1. With $0 for free. Maybe we can do a convergent equipment constraint. How to make a viral YouTube video without a camera, without a computer, right? So now on the opposite side, we have divergent constraints, which is, as you can imagine, ideas that are expansive. So instead of ideas coming together, we're seeking new ideas and new opportunities. So instead of restricting what we can use in the confines that we have, we're expanding it to say, what are all the possibilities here? What if we had everything that we needed? What if there was no ceiling to how far we can go or what craziness we can come up with? So let's think about all those converged examples we just did and see how we can apply divergent constraints to them. So that first one, how to make a viral YouTube video in 24 hours. I can actually think of a pretty interesting divergent concept for this one. Instead of 24 hours, we just did it in varying intervals until it became infinite, right? 1 hour versus 1 day to make a YouTube video. That'd actually be a pretty interesting video. I'd totally watch that. Let's go on to the next one, which was the budget one. It's like how to make a viral YouTube video with $0. On the opposite extreme of that, the video could be, I had a budget of $10 million to make a YouTube video. Obviously, you'd have to have the access to do that. And what I love about this process is that whenever you come to a new idea that you kind of like, you can actually take that new idea and then use it as inspo for the next idea. So now my new template is I spent $1 million to make this viral YouTube video, I can add a new constraint to it, and I can add another divergent constraint to it, or I can add a convergent constraint to it. So for example, I had $1 million budget to make a YouTube video, but I couldn't speak, right? So now I've added a new convergent constraint to that original idea. And you can see how this can get really, really fun and really complicated. You can basically just go down these different threads of inspo. You can converge, and then you can diverge from there. You can even backtrack if you want to, and then go down a different divergent path, or go down another convergent. And that way you can really just start to see like a spider web of your ideas come to life. And I actually like writing my ideas out visually like this, because then I can see the breadcrumb trail of where my thought process came from. And I can always backtrack to what was the original inspo, and then where did it end up at the end. So now that you know this formula, you're not going to be able to unsee it. Every creator on the platform is doing this, and it's smart, it's strategic. It's how you take a familiar idea and then run away with it to make something incredible. But just zooming out again, big picture, coming up with an idea, it's really just the first step of a greater creative process. And there are templates that you can use for each step of this bigger process, right? From generating thumbnails, editing videos, strategy, even bigger creative team decisions like hiring and building products. And I used to think that was overwhelming, but nowadays we have this cool thing called AI, which I've integrated into my entire creative process to move even faster and more nimble. And so if you want to see how I've been using AI in my workflow, I actually made a video about it right here, which goes into the whole process of scripting, ideating, and pretty much everything that I do. I think you're really gonna like it.